Hey Whisker,
Yeah.
I have an idea.
Okay.
I think maybe we should make a video for all the folks who have sent us emails about how to patch from scratch things that use our modules, specifically the bulkhead modules. What do you think?
Yeah, that makes sense. I do get several emails a week, and it's been fun answering them, but I think an FAQ or sort of like tutorial on how to
Yeah.
do some of this stuff is merited because a lot of people are very curious about how to do some of this stuff
Yeah,
and how it can help them solve problems in their studio.
yeah. And I see that we have one of our demo, well, actually, a bunch of pieces from our last demo.
Yeah.
I think, the RX-7 there on the right-hand side. And I see one of the VCRs, although I see a lot more VCRs. So,
There's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
ready to be turned into some sort of demonstration here.
yeah.
We
So,
just finished filming one, so that's easy.
yeah. So, why don't we...
So to
Show
be
folks.
like, I want to understand though, like you're talking about like showing it step by step, like explaining everything, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that's quite a bit.
Yep.
All right. So basically,
Buckle your
this-
seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen.
yeah, that this studio is my studio. It's not anyone else's studio. It's set up the way that I like it. And I understand that a lot of people may not have some of the stuff that I have. And I'm sure each one of those people is going to have things that I don't have. So I'll do my best to keep it generally useful information and try not to get too down in the weeds with the specifics of my stuff. Because while that's interesting to see somebody else's gear, I'd rather make it, more generally useful to anybody who thinks that these things, these little modules, might help them out. So we'll just do the bare bones tour here real quick, just so that anyone can understand the basic idea of the signal flow going on in this room. In the center, we've got the MIDI piano. And that's going right into Logic. And that's what you see on screen right now. And Logic lives in the big rack to the left. And it generates 32 channels of audio out via a big 32 in, 32 out audio interface. And it generates one MIDI output through a USB port to an Arturia beat step. And that's where we're converting into hardware MIDI. And out of the Arturia beat step, we've got a MIDI cable that runs across to the right-hand side into the back of that modular rack over there. And all the MIDI breaks out there into all kinds of different things potentially. And then the mixer that you see on the left-hand rack, that has 8 channels of audio that feed through a snake back over to the rack on the left-hand side. So all of the audio that happens on the modular rack ends up going through that mixer that's toward the bottom there, that big Mackie mixer. And any of the audio that's coming from Logic itself is happening over on the left-hand rack. So I know it's a little bit convoluted to think about, but essentially you just think of that rack on the right as the modular rack. And it is getting its MIDI control signal from the bigger rack, and it's sending a premix on 8 channels back over to the big rack. So it's its own outboard gear unit is that whole rack there. There's a lot more going on in here, but I think today that pretty much is just going to be involving those guys. And probably the RX-7 that's sitting up on top of the tower of VCRs. We'll probably use the VCRs too, because you know, how often do you get to use VCRs in a recording environment? So that should be fun. So let's actually start hooking up some sound sources. I already have a project open on Logic on the computer, so I have some MIDI signals being generated already. So we can take those MIDI signals, take a look at what I'm sending out, and then we'll use them to start driving some equipment.
Cool.
Okay, so we've got, what, 4 tracks there. Top one I'm using to send MIDI out through the beat step over to the modular rack on MIDI channel 1. And that's going to be driving the Lifeforms SV1. And the next 4 down are sending on MIDI channel 2. And they're heading over to the modular rack. And then they're going off to the vintage drum machine, the Yamaha RX-7. That only has one stereo pair for audio out. It doesn't have discrete outputs for the different drums. So while I can send MIDI notes out on independent tracks here, for one for the kick, one for the snare, one for the hi-hats, one for the shaker, they're all going to be coming back to me on a stereo pair. So I only have the top one set up to accept audio back. And the channels that these guys are coming back on are channels from that Mackie mixer. So I have the SV1 is going to be mono, and the RX-7 is stereo. So that's basically 3 of my 8 channels that I'm getting back from the modular rack, coming back into the computer for recording. So down here, this is where the MIDI's coming into the modular section over here, and there's MIDI signal coming in the back, and it's present at 11 outputs now. And one of those outputs is on the back, and it's on this wire, which is heading all the way up to the top of the rack here, and it's hooked up to channel 8 of this bulkhead 2 HP. And this passes the TRS MIDI signal from the front, or from the back inside the case, out to here, and then I've got this tiny little TRS cable that allows me to go from there right into the MIDI input of the Lifeforms. So now the MIDI signal is going from Logic to the beat step to the M2M up inside the case, popping out here, and it's in the Lifeforms. And you can see that the Lifeforms is indeed seeing that. The gate is opening and closing on the ADSR. But we have nowhere to hear it yet. And I suppose that means we should patch its audio output. So let's go the main out of the Lifeforms, and we'll go into my blue bus here of DB25 bulkheads. Now these are slightly different than the ones in the store because I've got 3U DB25 bulkheads stuck into 1U DB bulkhead panels, just so I can mount them sideways. And that's something you can do, but just note that the spacing of the jacks on the back, the DB25 jacks on the back, is a little bit wider than 21 HP. So we don't actually sell a module that has that double thing installed in the back. The one that we sell has a single one on the back. But you can still do this in a 3U orientation, because the 3U version does have the 2 for daisy chaining. And what I mean by daisy chaining is that when I hook this up to channel 1 on this blue bulkhead DB25, that means that it exists here and on channel 1 here, and on channel 1 here, and on channel 1 here, because they're daisy chained together. One of the DB25 connectors on the back is hooked to this module, and the other connector on this module is hooked up to this module, and the other one is hooked up to this module. So effectively, channel 1 is a passive mult across all the channel 1s of the blue DB25 modules. Same with channel 2 is hooked all together all the way up the column here. So I basically have a 8-channel passive multiplexer that exists at different points in the case or across multiple cases. You could do that as well. And so basically my main out of my life forms is on channel 1 here, which makes it convenient for me to pull it from down here where I actually want it. Alright, so we can now grab our life forms audio right there on channel 1. But we got to go somewhere with it. And that somewhere is obviously going to be our Mackie mixer. And I think channel 1 will work well for the bass. Make sure that my trim for that channel is set appropriately. It is. And my assignment for this on where it's going out, I can set it on these push buttons here as to which outputs I want it to go out of the mixer, and I have it on left and right. So that's the main out mix, which is this fader here, and that shows up on 2 channels back on the big rack. So basically, with this pan to center, if I patch it into this guy, it's going to show up on channels 9 and 10 over on my converter. So these, all 16 of these inputs have DB25 to 1/4-inch TRS breakout snakes. And the DB25 end of that is hooked up to these 2 modules right here. So one here is 1 on the Mackie mixer. 8 here is 8 on the Mackie mixer. And then the second one represents channel inputs 9 through 16 on the Mackie mixer. And like I said, we're going to go channel 1 on the Mackie. So I'm just going to plug it in to channel 1. And as you can hear, we're already monitoring that via Logic. So I'll turn it down a little bit so I can talk over it. So that's our SV1 audio output, routed all the way back up the chain to the computer with all of the superpowers that the console gives us. Alright, now let's get the SV1 actually sounding like something good. Alright, so let's do a funny thing. That should sound pretty good. Alright, so on the life forms we've got, 2 voices here. I'm using the first voice right now as being controlled by MIDI to set its pitch. So this voltage controlled oscillator here is being controlled by the MIDI notes there. And as of now we're just using the normal patch that it sort of operates under when you don't have anything patched. We're going to override a bunch of that. So normally this would be a saw from oscillator 1. So we're going to replace that, and this would be a pulse wave from oscillator 1, and this would be a sub-octave of the pulse wave. So we've sort of gotten rid of those, and instead we'll do something different. This top one that I didn't patch is the sine wave from oscillator 1. We are going to keep the sine wave, and the output of this 4-channel mixer presently is going to the input of this filter section. So right now we're just sending our MIDI controlled sine wave to this filter section, and the output of the filter section, specifically the low pass filter, is normal to our voltage controlled amplifier here, which is controlled by this ADSR. So no matter what we do right now, we're going to be having our sine wave through our filter, and its volume is going up and down with the notes on and off via this stuff here. But I'm going to do something funny and weird. I'm going to take the high pass output of the filter and run it back into this mixer. So now the output of the filter is 1/4 of the signal that's going into the filter. So the filter is feeding back into itself. Its high pass output is feeding back into its input. Now let's also feed back the low pass output into the filter's input section mixer thing, and let's also feed back the band pass part. So now the filter is feeding back into itself 3 different ways, and that's initially being fed with a sine wave, and the resonance is set fairly high, not enough to completely oscillate, but definitely give us some character. And the other detail here is that we do have some of the glide here, so we've got some portamento. As it changes between notes, it doesn't do so instantaneously, it glides between notes. And we're just maxing out our outputs here, and I kind of like how the ADSR is dealing with our rhythm. We got a fairly nice groove going on there, so I think that pretty much sums it up for this whole section. We can use this as is now for our bass instrument. Alright, this is going to do the jobs for our drums for this example. And this was an old RX-7 from Yamaha. It's a drum machine, and it will accept MIDI input control, but we only get left and right outputs. So nothing fancy or crazy or discrete or anything like that. This is a handy little unit. It's not super popular, but a buddy of mine pulled it out of a dumpster, broken, brought it to me, I fixed it, and I've definitely been using it in the studio ever since, so I think it's a good machine. So as long as we don't care about the limitations of just being a mixed output, it's fine. So we need to give this guy some MIDI, and we need to bring its line level outputs up to the point where it can work at the same level as Eurorack, because Eurorack is way louder than a stock RX-7 will put out, so we're going to have to gain that up a little bit. Alright, let's get these guys hooked up. Alright, so let's start with getting our MIDI signal into the RX-7, and like I said earlier, we've got 11 MIDI outputs going on thanks to our M2M module. I'm just going to plug it into this bottom one right here. That should be sufficient for getting a MIDI signal up to it. And then this is my left out, and to gain this up I'm going to use this ART TPS2. Is a 2-channel 12AX7 based tube preamplifier, and it will gain this signal up hot enough to be Eurorack levels. So I'm just going to drop it right in the front 2 here. So our left channel is going to be channel 1, right channel is channel 2, and it looks like it's swinging about exactly where I want it. It's just kissing the yellow lights here, and it's swinging way up on the output. So we're going to be getting some tube saturation, but nothing crazy. It's not going to crush it too much, it's just going to grit it up a little bit, which is really helpful for an RX-7, because an RX-7 is very pristine, very clean outputs. So by running it through some tubes here, we're not just getting it gained up to where it's useful, we're also getting it dirtied up a little bit so that it no longer sounds like it belongs on a 1991 car commercial or something. Okay, so obviously we can't hear that yet, so I guess it's time to talk about red bulkhead number 3. This is the bulkhead that I use via a DB25 to 1/4 inch TRS breakout snake. So that's basically DB25 plugs into the back of this module, goes down into the bottom section of this rack, and then breaks out to 8 TRS cables. Some of which go from, I should say, this TPS2. And that is channels 1 and 2 on here are the outputs of channels 1 and 2 on this preamplifier. So we can very readily grab some short patch cables here and grab 1, oh, sorry, 1 and 2, and I'm just going to patch those over to the Mackie. And as we explained before, 2 and 3 here are channels 2 and 3 input on the Mackie. So as you can hear, those are now coming up. And on the Mackie, I can now do some stuff. So I'm going to mute the bass channel so we can just hear the RX-7. And because it's coming in on 2 channels here, I'm going to check and see where I'm sending those off to. And it looks like while the bass was going to main, these both have the 1-2 buttons pushed instead of the left-right buttons pushed. So I know that these are sending over to 1 and 2 here. So I'm got them panned left and right. So 2 is getting left channel from the RX-7 and it's panned left here, and 3 is getting the right channel of the RX-7, so it's panned right. So I know that those are left and right panned before they go out of the Mackie and off to Logic in the computer. So I know that they'll be coming back into the computer in full-blown stereo. Alright, so that is the drums coming all the way through the system. But I don't think having a system like this where you can do modular fun stuff, that we're really doing the system justice by just passing it straight through like that. So let's actually have some fun with the signal. Let's do something like this. Instead of going right to the Mackie, let's see if we can do something like, we'll go 7 and 8 on our blue bus that goes between the top and the bottom of the rack. And then up here, like we said, 7 and 8 are 7 and 8 are 7 and 8 are 7 and 8. You could actually do this strange thing where I can take 7 here, patch that over to 2, and now whatever was on 7 is also on 2 on every level. So I'm going to copy 7 over to 2 and 8 over to 3. Okay? And then down here, I know that I now have those drums again on 2 and 3. So I'm going to grab 2 and plug that into the Mackie. And then I'm going to take 3, plug that into channel 3 on the Mackie. Okay, so now I've got my drums back, but I also have copies of my drums all over the place through the whole system. And the reason I wanted to do that is a little bit higher up. I don't just want to hear my drums, I want to see my drums. Okay, so we know that our RX-7 drums exist simultaneously at 7 and 8 and at 2 and 3. So I'm going to take advantage of that fact that they are up here. I'm going to grab left channel of the drums. I'm going to run it over and plug it into this tymkrs visualizer module. And I'm going to take the right channel from 3 and hook it up to this tymkrs visualizer module. So now I can see what my left and right channels are doing while I'm working up here, and I don't have to look all the way down to the Mackie or go into Logic or check the levels coming in on the converter or whatever, I can just always see what's going on live right here while I'm doing other stuff. I think that looks pretty cool too, so I'd like to get these lighting up, but the only other audio we're playing with today is going to be the lifeforms. We know that the lifeforms exists right here on channel 1, because that's the bus line that we're using to bring it down to the bottom. So we can just pull it from there, plug it into this guy, and one nice thing about the tymkrs visualizer modules is that they are a 4-channel mux, or passive multiple themselves. So I can get a copy of the signal again right there and pass it over to that module. So now I have 2 copies of the bass. And these knobs on the front of the visualizer modules help significantly. You can sort of pick what you want. We can't hear the bass right now, so I'm going to unmute it. We'll get those dialed in so that we can actually see the color shift that happens as the pitch glides from one pitch to another. There we go. One nice thing about having 2 modules hooked to the same signal is you can dial in different aspects of those signals that you want to pay attention to. You get completely different effects on the 2 of them. Alright, so now we got some blinking lights going. I think the next step here is that our bass is just being, generated and turning on and off according to the rules of our ADSR, but we have drums now. So we should probably make use of our drum signal to do some sidechain compression on our bass instrument. Alright, so this is probably one of the more complicated parts, just because sidechain compression is a little, if you don't already know what I'm doing, it's going to sound a little bit strange. But the basic idea is that we have drums, and when the drums make a sound, we want the bass to turn down. And that can be a little bit trickier than it sounds to pull off. You need a compressor involved that compresses the bass down, but is not making the decisions of when to compress it down off of what the bass is doing. It's making those decisions based off what the drums are doing. So therefore it's side chain compression. So we have a compressor down here, and I have channel 1 of this top channel. So these 2 meters and these knobs, I have that channel of this compressor sort of exposed on these jacks here. So I just need to feed my signal to the input of the compressor, and I need to feed a sidechain control signal into the compressor. And that one's going to be based on drums, but like I said, that RX-7, all the drums are mixed together in the output of it, so that's generally not ideal. For sidechain compression to work in a pleasing way, it really needs to be in time with the music and not too complicated or busy rhythmically. So we kind of have one element on this drum pattern that's really regular, and it's that kick drum. Boom, 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 boom. It's just 4 on the floor. And that's the sort of perfect source, but right now it's mixed in with all the rest of those drums. So in order to isolate just that kick drum, we know that the kick drum makes a lot more low frequency sounds than the other drums do. So if we send a copy of our drums to a channel on the Mackie, each one of the channels on the Mackie has an equalizer. So we can use the equalizer to get rid of all those high frequencies that will complicate the content that's coming from the drum machine. and simplify it down to just those low frequencies of just the kick, so that we get that quarter note rhythm effect going into our side chain control. So I think the first step there then is going to be getting a copy of the left or right of our drums so that we can pass a copy of, probably the left channel, pass a copy of the left channel into yet another channel on our Mackie. Alright, so to do this, I am going to use a 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch bulkhead module. So on these modules, they act as a passive multiple if nothing is hooked into the back jacks here. And I don't have anything plugged into the 1/4 inch inputs on the back of this module at the moment. So basically these 4 jacks are acting as a passive multiple right now. So I can use that to copy my left channel into more than one copy of itself. So I'm going to pull the left channel and I'm going to drop it in on one of the 4 inputs here. And then I'll replace what I just unpatched from the Mackie, channel 2, with that copy. And then I can grab another copy from over here. And we'll send that to channel 4 on the Mackie. Alright, so now we've got the left of the RX7's audio coming in down here. So channel 4 here, I don't want to send that out of the mixer on any of the stuff that's going back to the computer because we just want it for the compressor. So I'm going to make sure that all of these send buttons are disabled. Yeah, nothing is getting sent out. We can see it's clipping a little bit here, but that's not going to hurt us at all because this is not for us to listen to. This is for the compressor sidechain to listen to. It's pan to center, and let's see. I have the high frequencies turned all the way down. I have the mid frequency center put as high as it'll go, and it is turned down minus 15 dBs there, and it looks like we're giving it about plus 10 dB on the low frequency section. So basically the only thing left on this audio after this EQ happens is going to be the low frequency content. And then up here, here's our next big trick. We have this Aux Send section in these red knobs, and I've got it sending unity gain out on Aux Send number 3. So Aux Send 3 is getting unity gain of this. So it's coming out hot enough to clip out of Aux Send 3. And I believe that Aux Send 3 exists on our DB25 here. So we remember these two are coming up from the TPS, and I believe 7 and 8 here are hooked up to Aux Sends 3 and 4. So I'm just going to check that real quick with my oscilloscope. Yeah, that's that low, just the lows of the drums coming out on 7 here. And we should have some stuff on there because I noticed that some of the aux lines are still up for Aux Send 4 down here. So it looks like we're sending some of channel 1 out, some of channel 3, and that's it. So we do have the ability to pick what we want to happen on these two channels, a 7 and 8. So right now the one that's going to 7 is just the low frequency information from the RX-7. So we can use that to drive the sidechain input of the Behringer. So I'm going to grab it there at 7. And I don't remember exactly which one of these four goes to the sidechain input on the compressor right there, but that's an easy... Yeah, it looks like I guessed right. Looks like channel 3 ends up there. So now, anything on the entire mixer that I send to Aux Send 3 ends up going to the sidechain control input on the compressor. Which means that we can now pass something through the compressor, which I believe the input is on 5 and the output is on 6. And what we were trying to pass through there was our bass. So let's unhook our bass from the mixer, and we're going to grab it, and I think it's 5 and 6. So we'll try sending it into 5, bringing it back out on 6. Seeing if that gets us there. Oh yeah. That is compressing with the kick. Now if I stop sending things, that's what it was doing without the compression. And then I turn back on that channel 4. Yeah, that's what we want, right there. That's that side chain compression in action. And you can see the dial here and whatnot. It's showing what it's doing. We can see all that pretty clearly. But man, that sounds better. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so I think that's our audio chain all sorted out. Now let's actually do something visual with it, because we can. We have a bunch of stuff going on here, and it's all readily available and ready to be patched in. So basically, the VCRs and the DVD player here, and the CD and the tape machine, not that we're going to be doing anything with those today, but these video sources are hooked to the back of this patch bay. And the other thing that's hooked to the back of this patch bay is a RCA, an 8-channel RCA to DB25 cable. And that goes behind the rack up through this opening here and hooks to this yellow DB25 bus module. So basically we've got our VCR outputs available right here, channel 1, 2, and 3. So if I were to start these up, so that's channel 1, that DVD player. There's a DVD in there already. So if I just grab it here, and if I want to see what's on that, I've got options. I could use these screens down here. Can you see those, Addie?
Let me move there. Okay, yep.
So this is a 1U rack mount unit that has 8 composite-driven LCD screens in it. So those are on these green DB25 modules. So the input for screen 1 is on channel 1 here, and it buffers that signal and sends it right back out. So the output of that is here. So I can pass any video signal to that screen, see what's on that screen down here, and then grab the output from that screen to do stuff and send it elsewhere. So it acts as a buffer and as a preview, so I can see what's actually going on there. Okay. It's playing. So we should have like previews or whatever it's going to do. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that from the camera, but there's the Warner Brothers logo is showing up on that screen right now. So the DVD is playing fine. Let's check and see if our VCRs are started up. Looks like the top one did, so that's 3. So I'm going to put that onto preview monitor 3. Yep, and that's looks like it's got the VHS tape that has like 2 hours of the Toymakers logo and nothing else. So that's playing there. We've got Toymakers logos available now from channel 3. Channel 2, I'm not sure that that one is on yet. I'll patch it in. Yeah, it's not on yet, so I'll go ahead and power it on. Hit play. Okay, it showed up here on 2, and it looks like it's an episode of Nova called KGB, The Computer and Me. It's a brilliant story about a guy who figured out that someone was hacking into Lawrence Livermore via the TimeNet timeshare computing network back in the 80s. So we've got some fun video sources going on here, and now we can use them to do stuff. But we want to be able to see what we're doing with our glitch. So how do we want to set our glitch up? I think today I'm going to... So we've often shown that you can do a feedback loop using an H2A and an A2H by looping the HDMI from one back into the other. So I've done that a bunch on videos. So I think we'll do something different today. I think what I'd like to do is use an A2H to send a video signal into some more fancy modern equipment. Can you see this over here, Addie?
The ATEM?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a Blackmagic ATEM video switcher right here. And right now it's got channel 1 is being displayed. And this is channel 1, HDMI. So if I take this A2H module and hook that up to channel 1 on the ATEM, you can see it on my little monitor here maybe. Now I can patch any of these right up there. You can pass composite video around on these bulkhead modules and it works fine, by the way. So I just patch that up there and we should get, yeah, whatever preview is playing off that DVD at the moment. A Star is Born, whatever that's from. Okay, but we're obviously not going to be doing that. We probably want to do something more interesting. So let's take that DVD signal, get some longer patches here. Let's do something terrible. Okay, so if I take the DVD's output and let's use another one of those 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch that doesn't have anything plugged into the back, so it's essentially just a passive mult. And we'll put the DVD in on port 1 of it, and let's put the Nova episode on port 2 of it. That's effectively gonna like mix those signals together, which is not a valid composite signal anymore. It is bad and naughty and very wrong, and you should never do this because that's illegal. So
is that why we're doing it?
We've got this illegal signal here, and we're going to plug that in just so that we can see the horribleness. Okay, there. Now you've got the DVD and the Nova episode being played at the same time, but they're out of sync from one another, so they're both scrambling each other. So I like that. We can use that. So I want that available down on my preview monitors. So I'm going to plug that into my video monitor 4. So now my scrambled version is available down here, and I can see that scramble preview-wise. And I can always grab it from right here on the monitor's output, right? So now we've got our Toymakers logos available to be grabbed here. Our scrambled combination is available to be grabbed there. And the reason why I wanted to use the ATEM today is we can actually do something really weird, which is the output of my ATEM is actually going to a splitter here, HDMI splitter. Now the main line of it is going up to this monitor, and that monitor is feeding our little streaming box that's hiding back there, so that we can stream the output of the system directly to YouTube. But I've got the splitter here so that I can take the output of the ATEM and run it off to an H2A module to turn the output of the ATEM into an analog video signal available here. So if I grab that, I can plug that into one of my preview monitors. So I got channel 5 is available. So now the output of my ATEM is here on preview monitor number 5. And we obviously are not sending anything out to the ATEM at the moment, so we're just getting bars, which is fine for the moment. So let's see. The reason why I want that signal available to me is so that I can create a feedback loop by sending stuff into the ATEM and then taking the output of the ATEM, mixing it with what I'm sending to the ATEM. Let's just do a really basic version of that real quick. So to mix them together, we want to mix them together with control. So what I mean by that is we can use these the glitch CRT inputs to control how much of different things get mixed together. It's a passive mixer that has a special audio input section on it that allows us to also mix audio signals into video signals, which is another thing that is naughty and you shouldn't do, but we're going to do it anyway. So at the first composite input here, I'm going to bring in our Toymakers logo VCR. And at our second one, I want to take that, oh, we're using lots of patch cables today. I want to take that return from the ATEM and bring that up as my second input into glitch CRT. And of course, we need to get that back out. So I am going to take the output of the glitch CRT and put that on preview monitor 8 so I can actually see down here what I'm sending. And then it's buffered, so I can take the buffered copy of it, and that is what I'm going to bring up here to send through the A2H off to that input on the ATEM. As you can see on the screen, we now have a feedback loop happening, some of which is the Toymakers logo happening right there. But as I bring up that second channel, which is the return from the ATEM, you start to see some strange things start to happen from the feedback. And then if I drop that first input from the Toymakers VCR a bit, you see that we start to, like the jumping around stops because it's getting like a solid signal from the ATEM to lock onto, where that gets a little bit jumpy. Now, one thing I've noticed is that sometimes with these, because we're sending such horribly mangled things to them, is that the A2H converter can sometimes get a little bit confused with the signal. So if you notice that it's like super white like that, if you power cycle it, it generally comes back in and looks rather different than it was looking. So you see that? Now it's green. That's a bit more normal operating mode for this thing. Now that isn't to say that when it gets in that confused mode, that's not a fun thing, because you get all sorts of interesting effects once you've confused the A2H module, which is why that I would never fix that bug. I would leave it just the way it is, because it's actually useful. So basically here is just the ATEM feeding back into itself, and we're using a little bit of VCR signal to start the loop process going. And we get what Addie likes to refer to as the sweet spot, where you get lots of colors and not too much flashing, and sort of cells are forming and all that kind of stuff. But that's a little bit, you know, boring, because it tends to float itself into green eventually. So in order to combat the green menace here, what we tend to do is use the audio input of Glitch CRT to introduce extra signals into the mix. And in this case, you remember when we were using the Aux Sends on the Mackie mixer, I mentioned that we had some available here on 8, and that's Aux Send 4 down here on the Mackie. And as I said before, we have a little bit of channel 1 being sent to Aux 4, and a little bit of channel 3. So we've got some drums and some bass. So that's available here on 8. So we can send a little drums and a little bass up here to the audio input on Glitch CRT. And you can kind of see that we're sending something to it now, because the audio signal actually powers the modulation circuit that's in the Glitch CRT. So that little light right there is acting as a diode in the circuit, powering the circuit, like sort of rectifying the power coming in so that it can power the transistor that's in there. So now you can see that instead of flowing just to green, the audio, you know, like jerking DC voltage into the video signal, is actually keeping it from stabilizing at green, and it scrambles it up enough to keep the colors flowing around. Alright, so our other video signal that we had right here on channel 4 of our preview monitors, and note that I have an available additional input here on the Glitch CRT, so I can add that one in. And basically the reason why I would add in a scramble like that is so that I've got more color, like valid color burst information happening in the mix. You don't want to mix in too much of it, but you'll notice that when I dial it in a bit here, it's really going to change the size of the cells that form. And it should allow me to drop down the tymkrs logo a bit more even. And this is where it really gets into just like experiment, and you know, this is where Glitch CRT gets fun, because you can literally spend hours just messing with these potentiometers on this thing, trying to find hidden little magical planets to visit. The fun goes on and on here. And it's such a weird thing, but until you get your hands on one of these things and actually play with it, you don't understand how many hours, you know, especially like in the dark alone with music going, you can just turn this on and play and play and play, and it's actually quite an enjoyable way to spend an evening. So yeah, that is quite the effective little audio patch so far. And we can see everything on our preview monitors. We can monitor exactly what's going on with all of our things. Our DVD is now on its opening menu, so I can press play here to actually get that to start playing the movie. FBI warning is now on there. Our other tapes are still doing well. Yeah. I think that pretty much covers most everything I wanted to talk about. So that's a lot of different ways that you can use bulkheads to enable things in Eurorack that are just, you know, not normally easy to do without a million wires leaving the front of your system and going all over the room. You notice that of all of this stuff that I patched, we only have, what, 1, 2, 3 cables going from the Eurorack to anything else. That's pretty cool. I mean, that's a feat. Because it's actually, you know, a pretty advanced patch. So I hope that all makes sense, and I hope that helps anyone out there who's wondering if they can use these modules to solve problems in their studio. I find them very handy. I made them for myself, but as usual, when I find something useful, generally somebody tells me that I should put it in the store so that other people can use it too, because, you know, what's the point of going to the trouble of making this stuff without sharing it? Alright, I think that pretty much wraps this one up. Do you feel that I missed anything, or is there anything else about any of this that I didn't cover?
No, I think we're good. I mean, I'm busy staring at the cells, so...
Yeah, now that I've patched this, Addie is like itching to come over here and play with the glitch CRT and the Aux Sends, because, you know, you just change how much of something is sending. Like, you start sending a lot of that deep bass signal in, and you can just start to really get it to pulse. You can lower how much of the drums are being sent to it, and you get rid of some of that hashy sort of stuff. Turn the bass down, and then you just have your kick drum flashing through. Boom, 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 boom.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh,
So,
there's some blending there we haven't seen before.
yeah, I'm just gonna like turn off the camera and I'll let Addie sit in here for a minute. I'm gonna go play with the dog, because the Dalmatian was in his kennel while we filmed this for you guys. So I'm gonna go keep him company.
I'll see you guys later.
Bye, guys.
Bye.